Good to be here. It's good to be around cooks. I love cooks. I learned how to cook, and that changed everything in my life. And it's not just because it gave me a body of knowledge to write about. It changed the way I thought about the world. As people are telling you today, as we all know, as culinary people, we are trashing the earth in massive ways. We're creating huge dead zones in the ocean because of the fertilizer and the pollution and the waste runoff. We're growing horrible monocultures of corn. We all know the phrase, don't shit where you eat. We are doing that here on a massive scale, and we've just figured out that we need to get serious about this. The people who first told us about this, the people who first got us to pay attention, were chefs. They provided us information. They showed us where to look. Coming out now to talk about what it means to be a chef, what it means to be a cook, and what it means to be a chef are two iconic chefs. Pierre White, everyone here knows the seminal book, White Heat. It has never been recreated. There was never anything like it beforehand. In 1990, while another chef that I know I believe he was selling paperbacks in the snow at 95th and Broadway to feed his drug habit. Pierre White had created a vision of the chef that was true to chefs. He showed how passionate, how committed a chef could be through those beautiful black and white photographs. 9 years later, having cleaned up his act, another writer, another book publisher came along, Tony Bourdain, and wrote another book about the life of the cook that people embraced. It is because cooks have something to tell us that is bigger than just about food. Cooks have something to tell us about the way we ought to live. And that's why I love writing about chefs. That's why I'm very pleased to be introducing these two seminal, excellent, foul-mouthed, wonderful chefs to the stage to talk about what it means today to be a chef and to be a cook, perhaps more importantly. Tony Bourdain and Pierre White.
And you go in the middle.
I think I'll stand.
You're stand.
I'm going to stand.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to direct this here. First of all, I want to know from you. Thanks, chef, for being here. Are you a chef?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Tell us what you think it means to be a cook and what it means to be a chef.
I think, firstly, if you're going to be a chef, you've got to dedicate your life to your profession. It's not something you play with. When I was a boy and I stepped into the world...
Sorry, say that again, I couldn't...
When I was a boy, and I stepped into the world of gastronomy, there was no such thing as a celebrity chef.
Right.
Chefs were acclaimed. Boys came from a certain background. They came from a world which tended to be working class. You walked into that world, which was the tail end of Escoffier's world.
Right. You bridged these two worlds.
Some people say, hold on. And you walked into that world and you had your uniform. Your chef, he screamed, he shouted, and you responded. You did what he said. The first thing you were taught was discipline. Yes, chef, to every command. You never counted the hours. You never looked at your money. You were there to learn your craft. You were there for the right reason, to learn your job, to better yourself as a person. And that's all I did.
But you transformed the way people thought about cooks and about chefs?
I'm a great believer in life that you fight for what you believe in. And I wanted to be a great cook. And I had certain privileges in my life. Those doors that opened had 2, 3 stars Michelin above them. And I was given opportunities by those great men, whether it was Albert Roux, Pierre Kaufmann, Raymond Blanc, the rest of them. And I got that break in Harvey's in 1990. And I met 2 people. One was a photographer called Bob Carlos Clark, who was a great photographer. And the other was a man called Alan Crompton Batt, who invented restaurant PR. So I was around at the right time, with the right look, doing the right food, in the right place. People were bored of classicism. They wanted something else. Bob and I created the book White Heat together, Alan promoted it. Alan promoted me as an individual. And so for the first time ever, people had an insight into the world of a kitchen. Those black and white pictures which Bob created, when you think they were in the 80s, that book is almost 20 years old, and it's still being printed today. And today I go and sign books, and I'm shocked that people walk up with white heat. It's out of date in many ways, but what it does do is inspires through the pictures which Bob created. It makes people dream, and that's all you can give a chef, is a dream. And it's up to him whether he wants to follow that dream. You can never teach someone how to cook. You can show them methods, you can show them technique, but great cooks teach themselves.
What then is the difference between the chef and the cook? Do you distinguish between the two?
Your position in the kitchen. A cook tends to be a young boy. He's either an apprentice, a commie, or a chef de partie. Once you get into that senior level, then you become a chef.
What about today's chefs who run multiple restaurants?
That's their choice. You can't knock them, they're making a living.
We were talking about this earlier, and you said that there were three choices you had when you decided that you were going to move.
But that's when you're at that 3-star level. If you're a cook and you don't have a 3-star reputation to defend, you can do as you wish. I think when you have 3 stars, you have a duty to your brigade, to the establishment, to your clients. If I go to a 3-star restaurant tonight for dinner, I expect the man whose name's above the door, who won the 3 stars, to be behind the stove.
So if that chef is not at that restaurant, there is something dishonest about that.
Well, he's living a lie in many ways. When I was a cook, I worked 90 hours a week, 6 days a week. I'd leave home in the morning and I'd kiss my children goodbye. I'd arrive home at night time and kiss them goodnight in their beds. You know, you can only do that for so long before it starts to affect you. You think, I've been given so much. I've realized my dream as a cook. And so one day I was fishing and I thought, maybe it's time to retire from cooking, to retire from the stove. And I looked at my options. My first option was to retain my position and my status within my industry and not kiss my children goodbye in the morning and kiss them goodnight when they're in their beds. My second option was to live a lie.
To live a lie.
To live a lie. Pretend I cook when I don't cook. To question my integrity and everything that I ever worked for. My third option was to be honest. Ring up the Michelin, make an appointment, give them a date, and tell them not to include you in your next guide, that you will be retiring from the stove. That's what I did. The next day I was unemployed, no status. But for the first time in my life, it allowed me to discover myself as a person, because the energies that I had were going into me as a person and not into my food. Did I become a happier boy? Yes, I did. Would I have liked to have lived a lie? No.
Tony, what's a chef?
Well, I'd like to sort of track back a little to describe, you know, here I was in a kitchen in 1990, I guess, when White Heat came out. And, you know, it's easy to discuss, and we often tend to, those of us who were really affected by White Heat and who never ate it at Mirabelle or at Harvey's or any of Marco's restaurants, the effect of the book, it wasn't just those amazing black and white photos, you know, which were very important for us looking at the situation in America, because here for the first time was a chef who looked like us. It wasn't some roly-poly French guy, you know, with a mustache. It was, you know, somebody who looked kind of like us. It was the fact that those photographs were next to these impeccably crafted, beautiful, beautiful plates and recipes that to us sounded, and as best we could reproduce them in our own crude way, were delicious. But I think what's kind of useful for people here in the industry to look at, I mean, or I guess, is that, you know, try to imagine this. Marco was, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the youngest chef to get 3 Michelin stars. the first British-born chef to get 3 fucking Michelin stars. England, we're talking early 90s. This was huge, and yet at the height of his success and fame, and you know, everybody wanted a piece. You know, he had the salmon epiphany. You know, he's had a salmon on the hook, and he decides, you know what, fuck it. I'm going back, and I'm telling them they can have their stars back, and I'm going to go off and do other stuff. As best I can understand, that involves shooting lots of animals and eating them. But also, you very early on kind of made a transition that a lot of chefs are making now. What does chef mean? Then it meant simply, presumably, a cook, presumably, who leads. Chef, you're the chief, meaning you're a cook who can somehow get other cooks to show up on time and do what needs to be done to execute either your recipes or whatever recipes you've chosen to do in your restaurant. Maybe, you know, post Marco, that we've seen that definition start to change. The chef is becoming more and more. The successful chef is becoming more a CEO than a working cook.
And Marco is saying that they are no longer a cook, and that these people are living a lie.
Well, is that a bad? I guess I'll ask the question: is that a bad thing? I mean, do you think it's a good? If you're 52 years old and you're standing there in the kitchen cooking every single order for your customers, or even standing in your kitchen at 52 years old, is this a reasonable expectation? Do you think your customers are fucked to expect that of you? And are you fucked to expect that of yourself? It might be a noble cause. 52.
You can't
no
do
weekends
it.
ever off. Forget, you talk about kissing your kids at night, you know, forget it. We all know the restaurant business is a killer. Clearly the playing field has changed. I'm saying, you know, I was speaking to someone who I respect a lot earlier, and they were saying, you know, I understand that when I go to Jean-Georges restaurants, Jean-Georges is not going to be cooking my dinner for me. But when I go to the flagship and I spend that kind of money, I kind of expect them to be there. Is that a reasonable expectation or not? I think it's how you, as a chef, you know, as a successful chef, manage those expectations. Keller, St. Thomas of Napa, who we all, I think, saw as a hands-on guy a while back, I think we're all kind of loosening our grasp on this unreasonable notion that I think we all of us somehow expected Thomas Keller to die behind the stove. And I think it's a cruel and snobbish assumption. And I was kind of relieved to read in the Washington Post, I think it was, where he's talking about himself now as a CEO with an obligation to the people who helped him get where he was as a working chef, to find their own thing, to set them up in their own businesses under this umbrella organization, and to get bigger. I don't know whether I find anything wrong with that, you know, particularly since I sure haven't worked in 9 years, so.
Marco, what's your response to Tony here about Jean-Georges, Thomas Keller, people everyone respects?
If you look at the great restaurants of France, Georges Blanc, Michel Garard, Freddy Girardet, they didn't cook exactly behind their stove frying the meat, but their presence was in the kitchen. They were behind their pass. They greeted their customers. They were proper restaurateur chefs. Is to disappear off and charge high prices, I think, is wrong. I think you have a duty to be there. So, for example, when I was a boy, Albert Roux was behind the pass at 50 years old. He turned up to do the pass. He left after lunch. He turned up in the evening to do the pass. He left after the last check. He didn't physically cook behind the stove, but he was behind his stove. He was behind his pass. He knew exactly what went on.
Good point.
I'm interested in what Joel Robuchon does next. I mean, I don't care if it's an atelier in Tokyo or New York or Las Vegas. I'm interested in what Joel Robuchon, as a spiritual entity who commands the loyalty of a lot of talented people who've come up in his organization. I'm interested in what he does. I guess
But Gilles doesn't have 3 stars anymore.
the 3 stars are, yeah.
When Gilles wanted to get rid of 3 stars, he retired and then went on to do what he's doing now, which tends to be a 1-star concept. That's what he does. But while Joel had 3 stars, he never left his kitchen. He never left his business. He was there for his punters. Okay, he charged accordingly, but he knew everything that went out. If he didn't touch it with his eyes, he touched it with his hands, his palate, his presence. It makes a very big difference, the chef's presence in a kitchen. is enormous. It's like if you look at the greatest football club in the world, Manchester United. If Alex Ferguson wasn't on the touchline every day when they're playing, would they get the silver they get? No, they wouldn't. His presence on that touchline, driving the troops, making the decisions, wins them trophies. And the chef's presence is exactly the same in the kitchen. It retains the discipline.
But do you want to eat that food anymore? Do you want to eat a 3-star Michelin meal, 14 courses, it's going to take you 4.5 hours?
Is when you think, if you look at the modern day 3-star, they control their clients by forcing these 12-course, 15-course, 16-course menus down their throats. It's very easy to put one scallop on a plate times 4 for a table of 4. Very easy. If you look at the old world, majority of people went off the a la carte. That's when you had to cook. When you've got a table of 6 with 6 different main courses, they're dictating to you, you're not dictating to them. Whenever you go to a 3-star restaurant today, they force you down this tasting menu road, which one is boring. Secondly, you've forever been interrupted. Do I want to eat one little scallop? No, I don't. I want to eat a plate of scallops. I'd like 2 courses. I want to get stuck in.
Fair question then.
And I don't like tepid food. I mean, how do you keep one little scallop hot? I don't get it.
Okay, fair question. 3-star restaurant where they tell you how to eat your food, 4.5 hours, or Katz's Deli. Where are you eating?
Well, firstly, I don't want to eat in the chapel of rest, because that's what it's like. It's like dining in the chapel of rest. And you're dictated to, you're made to feel privileged that you're there. Forget it. If you look at the great French restaurants of the 50s, 60s, 70s, the 80s, like Maxime's of Paris, La Selle, La Tour d'Argent, La Grande Pifort, Gerard's restaurant, Boccus's restaurant, they are proper 3-star restaurants. I was a boy who was inspired by the great 3-star restaurants. I love the whole romance of it. The only thing that doesn't date within our industry is romance. You walk into these new modern day temples of gastronomy, they're quite boring, in my opinion. I don't get it. 15 courses of what? But that's me. Do you like 15 courses?
Yeah, but we're all jaded feed bags here. You know, we've eaten everywhere. We've eaten a lot of really great places.
But you like eating 15 courses?
I'm kind of over it. Unless it's sushi.
I never got
Actually,
into
the
it.
last great 15-course meal I had was at a sushi place in Tokyo, and I ate, I think, 20 courses in 20 minutes.
I get that.
All of it by
get
hand.
that.
And it was the most amazing dining experience I've had in a really long time.
But I mean, I went to a restaurant 2 years ago, and I was given 2 choices, 18 or 24 courses. That's my choice. I'd just flown in on a 7-hour flight. I'm exhausted. So I go for the 18 courses, like an idiot. I'm now sitting there 3.5 hours later, thinking, what am I eating? I forgot. And I'm now convinced I've had more than 18 courses. And I said, excuse me, what course am I on? To the maitre d'. And he said to me, the chef slipped in a few extra courses. I said, can I have the bill? He said, but you haven't had pudding yet. Well, I don't want 4 puddings. I just want to go home.
So is this style of eating, do you think is it finished? Is it
Look, as long as the public demand it, they can have it.
just not something that you are interested in?
I'm not interested in it. You know, I'm not.
You know who gets fucked in this arrangement worse than anybody? The pastry chef.
Because they got to stay up really late.
They all have great pastry chefs, you know. And all of these restaurants we're talking about, they're amazing, you know, world famous pastry chefs. And you know, you're hitting course 18 halfway through your 4th or 5th meat course, and you're thinking, you're counting courses. You're thinking, I'm not making it through the cheese, and I hope they send all the desserts at once, because you know somehow the fact that I'm not eating is going to get not noticed. But they get screwed. Nobody eats it. It's all you take the obligatory little bite, and that's it. So what's wrong? I mean, what are we getting wrong these days?
It's cooking by numbers, isn't it? That's exactly what it is. I get painting by numbers, I don't get cooking by numbers. And it really confuses me. I mean, they show you the menu. They should leave it there for you to look at, and you can tick it off as you go down.
But it's your fault, man.
Nothing to do with me.
It's your
No,
fault.
no, no,
Everybody
nothing to
wanted
do
to
with
be
me.
like you, and they wanted to make those pretty things, and they got a little, maybe they just got a little overambitious, and
But it's about controlling. It's about controlling the punter. It's taking them down a road. It's one-dimensional.
I should point out, by the way, that I had a really remarkable meal at your place, the U Tree Inn. The most insane establishment, most delightfully insane establishment. It's basically a pub out in the middle of, where is it?
It's in the middle of Hampshire.
Middle of Hampshire,
Surrounded
wherever
by
that
lots
is.
of deer.
Apparently, Marco needed some place to drag, he shoots a lot of animals, and he needed some place to drag them where they would presumably cook them. And so you walk into this place, it's like a country pub, the ceiling's around half of our height. You got to duck in, there's some guy behind the stick cranking pints, and the menu is your usual country menu of dead animals with bread pudding, bread sauce, and the traditional British accompaniment done impeccably, of course. But what's really cool is that on the menu there are all of these really wonderful classic dishes that only in an alternate universe would belong in this pub in Hampshire. The dishes from Maxime and these Escoffier-era dishes and some greatest hits from his career that are available basically nowhere else on earth and thoroughly, thoroughly wonderful. And that nobody's standing there saying, you know, and the next course is, let me spritz the air and then we'll...
But the bottom line is, it's about feeding people. It's about eating. It's about getting stuck in. Do I want a waiter telling me how to eat my food? Do you think I need that? I had it. He gave me 3 tiny pieces of lamb and told me which one to eat first. He told me they were different. They were not different, trust me.
I need to ask you two something about a new role of the chef that has recently happened. I don't know if you know this, but some chefs actually have television shows. Are you aware of that? What is the role of the chef and the media and television shows? Is it a worthy goal for young cooks, this television business? You started doing shows. You've been doing shows for years now.
Is it a worthy goal for young chefs?
Yeah.
No, it's an undignified business. And if anyone who gets into the restaurant business hoping to get a TV show is, you know, kind of finding an obscure route. I mean, the general route to television is, you know, move directly to fellatio, I think, but it's, I think we, both of us, neither of us, when we first entered the restaurant business, imagined a career in television. And I'm going to guess, while there might be some people who've gotten into the restaurant business in the hopes of later parlaying that into a television career, it's a pretty bad way to go. All I can say is I think the bigger question is, first of all, I think you're fucked if you, short answer, I think you're fucked if you're going into the business expecting to get on television, or if that is your goal. I think the bigger question is, do you have any kind of responsibility at all as a former chef or a current chef, once you're lucky enough to, you know, if people are silly enough to give you a TV show, do you have any responsibility at all to the citizens of the world? What do you think?
Question.
I think, I tend to do reality TV, but what I try to do is put as much reality into the show as possible. I try to give people an insight into the world that I came from. It's a vehicle for me to inspire people to want to cook.
Not cook.
To want to cook. I love the way you try and put words in my mouth. You're a funny boy.
That's a journalist for you, isn't it?
But I think you've got to try and, my job is to try and inspire people to want to cook, to have an affair with food, to improve their quality of life. I think that's what's really important.
You mentioned that a couple of times, inspiration.
I think it's very important because I cannot teach anyone how to cook. People teach themselves how to cook. It's something that comes from within them. As I've always said, great cooks have 3 things in common. The first thing they have in common is they accept and respect that Mother Nature is the true artist. They are the cook. Secondly, everything they do becomes an extension of them as a person. And thirdly, they give you an insight into the world that they came from, the world that inspired them, and they show it off on their plate. And that's what great cooks truly do. And if I sit and talk to a lot of cooks, they tell me their story. And I listen to their philosophy. And then I eat their food. It's so unhinged. A lot of cooks just cook for the wrong reason. They step into the industry to be stars, to be celebrities, to go on TV. My advice would be to anybody who wants to be a cook as a profession is go in, keep your head down, do your job, learn your trade. As Fernand Poin said, perfection is lots of little things done well. And that's all it is. And when I take people around me, all I try to do is give them great understanding. All I try to do is inspire them, to get them to bring something from within themselves. And if we think back, my favorite cook was my mother. And all great cooks, if you look at their palates, a lot of them go way back into their childhood. And what you have to do is give people, you have to inspire them, you have to get them to tap into the whole romance of gastronomy. Because food is very romantic. It's very special.
But you're talking to a young cook who's working at a high-end restaurant in New York City, and they're working 90 hours a week, and they're turning potatoes all day long, and they're just sort of stuck. What do you tell this chef?
Firstly, that when I started out, that's exactly what I did. What did it do for me? Number one, I became incredibly disciplined, incredibly patient, incredibly fast at what I did. Because the quicker you work, the more you learn. Also, when you're doing all those hours, you don't question it. When you're doing all those jobs, you're learning knife skills. You're absorbing your environment. The people around you are sharing their knowledge. You learn more with your eyes than anything else.
Tony, you're known for your perfectionism in the kitchen, right?
No. I think for the cook you talk about who's turning potatoes in a cellar in a busy restaurant, almost anyone they see on television is a completely alien, has really no relationship to them at all. You know, they're in the real world. They're going to learn, as Marco said, from the people around them in a real world situation. Seeing someone on TV at this point in the game, meaning they're already in the business, they're already turning potatoes, a TV chef has no reality for them at all. They're not stupid. They get it. You know, okay, hey, Wolfgang Puck used to be a really important, great chef, but the guy he is on TV now has no relation to my life and no relevance to my life, other than, you know, hey, maybe when I'm 50, that would be a good gig. To me, the best you could hope for, the best role model you could have in American food television, I think, is Julia Child. You know, she changed the world. You know, when I talk about a responsibility, do you have any responsibility as a, note I said former chef on television. You know, if you're on television as an entertainer, you have no responsibility to anybody other than presumably to be reasonably entertaining. But I think if you're a former chef, you kind of owe it to the people you work with, I think, to not be completely full of shit. And I think that's, you know, I think that's why you know, looking back how, and the further along the food television thing we go, the better Julia looks. She changed the world. Her cookbook was on every refrigerator, always. She didn't endorse anything, ever. You know, she could have been the Martha Stewart of her time easily. You know, had a gigantic multimedia empire. You know, didn't do it. The recipes still work. And you watched that show and you thought, well, you know, maybe, okay, I don't know how to do that, but she can do it. And it's a little extra work, but she's made me want to do it. She raised expectations. She, as Marco said, inspired people, and she changed the whole game for cooks across the board, and also along the way, you know, made television about people cooking a viable concern. So,
what's your point?
My point is, you know, put her as the ideal, and somebody who's saying you don't really, you know, all you have to do is crack open a can of Cheese Whiz and a box of Triscuits, and it's okay. I don't think it's okay. Okay, I think there's good for the world food television, and there's food television that's clearly bad for the world. It's dumb things down. It lies to you. Anytime your host says, man, that's really good, and it's clearly shit, it's bad food TV. Anytime someone tells you that what is clearly crap is okay to feed your kids, much less yourself, then it's bad food TV. Like any other TV, I guess, you always have the option to change the channel.
So again, back to being honest. I would imagine you would agree with Tony on those points.
I think you have to inspire, but that's what you can do through a TV, is inspire people. You cannot teach people how to cook. You inspire them to buy the right produce. That's the first thing. And then what you do is, by what you do with it, you inspire them and give them the confidence to want to have a go. And that's all it is. In a strange sort of way, you're taking them by the hand. Come on, have a go. Because all cooking is, really, is confidence. When I was a boy, I remember Albert Roux, when I first went to La Gavroche. I was the only English boy in the kitchen, 19 years old in 1981. And I was the commis on the sauce with a boy called Claude. And Albert called me into the service, after service into his office, sorry. He said, Marco, he said, you can cook as well as anybody. He says, do not be scared of the stove. And he was absolutely right. I was intimidated by a 3-star stove. It changed my life. I went back the next day and I attacked the stove. You have to attack the stove. You have to have that inner confidence and that belief that you can do it. And if you mess it up, who cares? Because by messing things up, you take great knowledge. Have another go. As I always say, I think this is the most important thing I would ever say to a young chef. Cooking is a philosophy. It's not a recipe. Unless it's pastry, then it becomes chemistry.
Does this mean you're finished?
Oh, right, I thought you'd had enough of me.
I want to ask one more thing, Chef. What are you doing now? Who are you now? What do you do?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm just Marco. I'm myself. It's a 24-hour job.
I mean, really?
Trust me.
All right. Should we open it up to questions, or
Ready for questions.
would you like some questions?
quickie,
Because there's probably a few people would like, especially
Who has
since
a question?
we're very lucky to have Mark Pierre White here. Yes, indeed. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm Donna Pernomo from Yono's Restaurant in Albany, New York. And to Tony, I just wanted to say, for 2 different reasons, your segments, one on Beirut and the one on Indonesia, are particular favorites of ours. And just some comments from you on filming those.
Wow, one was really, really, one of the happier experiences of my life, and the other was heartbreaking.
The reason why Beirut was so powerful is because it was honest. We weren't getting the news from anybody else. This was a real show about what actually happened to somebody who experienced it.
The best thing about doing the show is I get to do stuff. I mean, I get to do stuff that I get to live out my dreams. Sometimes those dreams end up, turning into nightmares. I had certainly, my heart broken in Beirut, seeing this wonderful place pounded back 20 years. I get to see places like Indonesia that are indescribably beautiful. I get to hang out with my heroes, shooting Bambi. But, I think, when you see, I have the perfect job. I mean, the best job in the world. I go anywhere I want, and I pretty much do whatever I want. As long as I make television, people seem to be willing to finance this. But I guess every once in a while you bump into a real world that, you understand the rules that most people in the world live by, which is that bad people can come at night and take you away, that bombs can fall from the sky and kill you, that there's not enough food, that dinner could last 4.5 hours and have 24 courses, like that.
Okay, we have another question up here.
Hi, my question is for Marco. I was wondering if you could tell me an example of a chef now that's working in the classical Michelin sense that you referred to versus the more progressive multi-degustation courses that you see. Is there anybody doing that now in France, in Europe? I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida.
I can't really hear her.
Somebody, you're looking for an example for Marco of a French chef working now in a multi-starred operation doing a multi-course degustation. Oh, so what old school guys are out there doing it right would be a...
Not necessarily old school, but who's doing it who's cooking and running their restaurant in the way that he admires versus what he said he has an issue with.
Yeah, I understand. I can hear you, sorry. If you look at someone like Alain Passard in Paris, he's there behind his stove. He's a man of nearly 60 years old. He's a prime example. If you look at someone like Pierre Gagnon, he's behind his stove, doing it every day. I'm not saying he's on the sauce section, he's behind the pass, he's running his restaurant. Boyer in Reims, Michel Garral's still there doing it. Bocuse, who's 77 years old, he's still in his restaurant every day. It's a way of life for them. And they're the chefs I truly admire who have won their 3 stars. They've stayed loyal to what they worked hard for, and they still work hard retaining it because it's a way of life for them. It's an extension of them as a person. Do I want to eat in Alain Ducasse's restaurant? Well, he's got so many of them, but he's never there. Just another restaurant, isn't it? Soulless. When you walk into a great 3-star restaurant run by a great 3-star chef and his wife, you know they're in the house. You feel their presence. I didn't hear the first part of the question.
She said, what 3-star restaurant or chef out there that's 25 or 30 years old and not somebody who's 70?
Well, firstly, there's no 3-star chef who's 25 and 30. I was 33, and I'm still the youngest.
Hi, Wayne Edwards from the Food People. I'd like to ask Marco who he admires, who's cooking at the moment, particularly in the UK.
If I was going to go for a Michelin-starred dinner tonight in the UK, I'd mostly go to the Memoir à 4 Saisons. See my old friend Raymond Blanc. He's still there, in his business, behind his stove, inspiring his troops, 30 years on. He's, in many ways, the last of the old world is Raymond. He's the real deal.
I have a question. I'm Norman Van Aken, and I've been cooking since 1971. I was given White Heat by Charlie Trotter in 1990, by the way, and admired the book immediately. The world has changed since you and I started in kitchens. And my question is this: what do you think about these TV guys that scream and throw and decide that the lesson out there for the chefs is to get up in their face and throw shit at them and, you know, light their apron on fucking fire? What do you think about that?
Are we talking about Gordon Ramsay?
I'm talking about someone that does a pale imitation of you.
I love this man. You're a funny boy. The world has changed since 71, 78 when I stepped into the kitchens. As I think, If you're a chef and you step onto TV, you have a duty to your industry. You have been given a stage to express yourself, to show yourself off. And the last thing you should be doing, in my opinion, is belittling people. You're there to inspire. That's all.
But Chef, you were famous for bringing people to tears.
I was going to add to that.
Gordon Ramsay made himself cry. It was his choice.
Do we have another question over here? I saw somebody raise their hand. Okay.
Hello, my name's Brian. I'm a cook, and I have from New York. I now live in Boston. Utmost respect for all three of you chefs as authors and also as cooks. One question I do have is basically where you guys now find cuisine going. Talking about food, where it's been, Girardet, old school, going new school, chemicals, everything that's there.
Why don't we all answer the question? I mean, for me, what I'm noticing among my chef friends and what I want more and more, I'm becoming more, I just want to go straight to the good stuff, okay? I want a properly sauced pasta. I never want to feel bad about wiping the bottom of my plate with a crust of bread. At this point in my life, I know what the good shit is, I think, and I want that, and I want to dispense, more and more I want to dispense with the nonsense and the artistic vision. That's not to say I am not in awe. I mean, to go to Per Se, for instance, and seeing that level of technique and that kind of vision all brought together in one environment isn't a wonderful thing. But more and more, I want just some really, really good high-test sushi. And I want to eat it over, or if I get my tasting menu, I want it over a counter. I don't want to wear a tie. I don't want to behave for my waiter. I want to be fed in an informal situation. I want to feel comfortable. That's becoming more and more important to me. What are you looking for?
I personally think the most important aspect of any restaurant is the environment you sit in to eat your dinner. I can go to a restaurant tonight, and if I don't like that environment, it doesn't matter how good the food is they give me, I don't want to eat it. I don't want to be there. So I'm very sensitive to my environment. And what I want is I want one course every night of something which is cooked really well and delicious. If I want a steak, I want a great steak cooked medium rare how I like it, within an environment I want to sit in. If I want a piece of fish, I want it on the bone. Cooked deliciously, a little bit of olive oil, a little lemon, bit of salt crystal, salad on the side. That's me. A great bowl of pasta, a nice risotto.
Michael?
Yeah, I couldn't agree
You
more.
want to go?
Simple stuff. Like Tony said, it's a good rule in writing too, is the best rule of writing is just to take out the boring bits. And that is how you would like to cook. Simple food. I love that America is embracing fat. That we're embracing pork belly. That's a great sign. That's a hopeful sign. So I think we have nothing but good times to come in our food world.
Let me ask you a question. Single next big thing ingredient. What do you think? Or spectrum of ingredients? I'm guessing cartilage. I think, we're fat, it's so last week. I think we're moving into skin and cartilage.
I'll do that.
Like our Chinese future masters, the Chinese. And I think it's a good thing.
Are you guys, the follow-up question from the guy from Boston is he thinks you're spoiled that you've had all the 18-course meals,
We are, yes.
but lots of other people that haven't had them, that when they do get to go, they really enjoy them.
I enjoy a long multi-course meal still. I love great service. I love really elegant, easy service that makes me feel comfortable. So yes, once a year or twice a year, I can do a long meal like that if the kitchen really cares about its food.
is it okay? I mean, is there something wrong with the meal if you collapse into a bloated, like a bloated farting gas bag, groaning in bed, praying to God to not throw up your $1,200 worth of food?
Well, the problem is,
you know, because you feel like you wasted it.
the thing is, any restaurant
I mean, you're
you go
right.
to,
I am spoiled and I am jaded, but is there something
yes, I think it's right. I think it's
fundamentally wrong with that?
It's selfish of the chef to do that. They want to impress you. You walk into a restaurant, they want to impress you. It's Marco Pierre White. They're going to, you know.
As I said to you earlier, the most poisonous sauce in a kitchen is a chef's ego.
And, and I said, when you said that to me, and it's very interesting and very good point, you were also famous for having an extraordinary ego. Is that true?
I never fed 18 courses to anybody.
Hi, I'm Marcella from the Big Island of Hawaii, and my question is to all three of you. What do you think of the new trend of underground dining right now?
Tony knows a lot about that. You've done shows in that. You've eaten a lot of that. You should probably take that
I
one.
think the more venues for cooks to stretch and the more venues for people to eat in, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a positive trend. I don't know that it's gonna, I don't think it's a next big thing. I think it is a basically elitist construct. I think all of the bad things that people say about this, they have a point. But on balance, I like them. I think it's a good venue. For cooks to do stuff in restaurants, or to do stuff in an environment that, or do things that they can't do in a restaurant elsewhere, particularly, I think they're really valuable when you're talking about illegal ingredients, when you're talking about bootleg cheeses and stuff, then I think it's the best thing ever. Do you have this stuff in England? Underground, like sort of like a floating card game. They meet in an apartment or a warehouse or, you know, ortolan parties. And
We're too conservative in England.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm graduating CIA in 2 weeks, and I wanted to ask you what your opinion was. Obviously, I think in your time, food is more about elevating cuisine, whereas I'm starting as a chef, or I'm sorry, starting as a cook who's a culture who's making things out of Ritz crackers and Campbell's soup broth. How do you feel a young chef's responsibility is as far as bringing back fundamental cooking techniques to just middle America and people in general, other than the convenience?
I think it's vital. Vital. I think everyone. I think you have an obligation as a sentient human being to be able to roast a chicken, to be able to cut an onion. I think there's a baseline. I think it is a worthwhile aspiration that every child, every human be taught how to feed themselves and maybe a few others, if at all possible, to the best of their ability. I mean, should we cook? Should we know how to cook as humans? I think so.
Oh, I think so, absolutely. It's a fundamental act. It's a fundamental act of our humanity. If we ignore it, we ignore being human and connecting with other humans. Cooking for and with and dining with family and friends is one of the most important things that we do. And if we don't know how to do it, we're losing a lot. Maybe, I think this group has been sitting still for a long time. Maybe like one more question?
There's one more right up here. Who was raising their hand?
My name is Miles Quinn. I'm from New York City. I work at Le Bourdain, and I would like to know a word of advice for young cooks.
Wait a minute, you work at Le Bourdain? Yeah. What can I tell you?
No.
It's a great restaurant. For young cooks, show up on time. That's the best advice I ever heard, best that I could ever give. Show up on time every day. It says so much about you. I think most chefs feel, I'm going to guess, most chefs feel that they can teach you to cook, they can't teach character. You know, are you the sort of person worth spending time you don't have to teach skills to? Showing up on time demonstrates that you're a serious individual. I'm facetious, but honestly, that's it. Show up on time.
Marco, you said a lot of great things about 2 and 4 young cooks. What are your final words on?
I tell this young man to continue to allow his mother to guide him.
Ladies and gentlemen, cooks, chefs, food people, thank you so much. Thank you, Marco, for being here. Thank you, Tony.